Hi, my name is Jason Renaud, and welcome to Intro to Maya, or Modeling for Noobs. So this is going to be following the Chapter 1, Modeling for Noobs, in my PDF. So if you wish to follow along, you can open this up, and I'm going to be going through it in this short video. So in this chapter's takeaway, it's very important that you become comfortable in navigating the scene. This should become second nature to you. So we're going to be using the WER shortcuts, which are going to be the move, rotate, and scale. Also knowing the names, the keywords such as vertices, edges, faces, hypershade, polygons, and so forth, as well as knowing the 15 basic modeling tools, and we're also going to discuss how to clean up your scene. So step one, the first thing here to take away, the basic 3D concepts, is that we're going to be working in a 3D environment. So 3D has three axes, so the Y and Z. When we create simple primitives, we can go up here to polygons, and I'm going to create a cube here. And if we look at the cube, there are no manipulators yet, but if I press W, which is my move tool, also known as the transform tool, we can now see the three arrows. So if I click and drag the yellow one, I can bring it up and down, the red one, the blue one here. As you press them, it will change color to yellow. Yellow represents the selected arrow. If I want to move along two axes at once, I can click on the red square here, which means it's going to move along the y-axis and the z-axis that we can see always through the gizmo at the bottom left of our screen here. Now if I press E, this is going to activate my rotate tool. So I can rotate here along the y-axis, this way along the z-axis, and this way along the x-axis. You can see all of this also being transformed in the settings of the object on the top right here. So if I want to, I can go back in here and type 0, and it's going to translate back to 0. If I want to, I can even select more than one and press 0, enter, and it's going to put everything back that you selected at 0. And finally, the third one is R, which is your scale option. Again, same idea if you wish to scale along one axis versus the other. And you can also scale on two axes at once by pressing the little square. And if you use the cubes here, you'll scale along all axes by clicking the middle one or along this one as you've seen just before. So these are the shortcuts, W, E, R for move, rotate, and scale. You can also find those options, those manipulators on the left side of your screen here. So this is your move, your rotate, and your scale. Okay, so basic polygon concepts. So on screen here I have a basic cube. So I'm going to scale it up a bit just to make it clear. So the first thing to know is that the big gray spaces here on the cube are its faces. The lines making the face are called edges, and the dot connecting these edges are called vertices. You can alternate between these modes by right-clicking on the object, going to Edge for edges, going to Vertex to select the vertices, faces, or going back to Object mode. So the Maya's interface. All right, so the top menu bar is up here. This is where you see your file, edit, create, select, modify, and so forth. And this is what you'd find in any software application on your Windows or Mac device. So if I go to File, you're going to see a bunch of options and so forth for all of them. So this again, top menu bar. This is the menu sets. These are going to adjust and change what the menus are in your top menu bar. So right now we're in modeling mode. So we can see that we have the mesh, edit mesh, mesh tools, and mesh display. And if I drag and select animations, for example, we're going to change all of this, and it's going to change now. So display, window, key, playback, visualize, and so forth. So I'm going to bring it back and keep it in modeling. The left side here is my toolbox, and this is where you're going to find your select tool. This is the lasso tool for selecting more than one object, very similar to Photoshop. So for example, if I have a cube, a cylinder, and a sphere, and I just want to select if I want to select everything, actually, I can marquee select, so by just pressing and dragging. But you can also select the lasso tool and just select what you want by doing this. I personally never use this tool. Paint selection tool, we're not going to touch this right now. This is the move tool, which will allow me to move things. As you can see, since I have more than one object selected, I can actually move both objects at the same time. Same for the rotation and the scale. Next part is my viewport layout. So currently I am working in my perspective. If I want to see more views, I can press this icon here, which is going to show me the 4 views: the top view, the front view, the side view, and the perspective view. To alternate between each one of them, you hover with your mouse over the view you want and hold that and press the space bar. So this is going to bring me in the top view. So if I go down again, clicking this will show me the 4 view, the single view, the side-by-side view, and that's the shortcut for the outliner. Excellent. So I'm going to close everything up and go back to my perspective. To navigate your scene, you're going to be pressing the Alt on Windows and full-size keyboards for Macs, or the Option key for Mac laptops. So by pressing that key and left mouse button, you'll be able to rotate around your scene. With the middle mouse button, you'll be able to zoom in and out. And the right mouse button, you'll be able to dolly the scene from side to side. Now, if, for example, you lose yourself in the scene and you do not see your objects or your assets anymore, what you can do is go up to Windows, Outliner. This little window is a list of all of the assets that you currently have in your scene. So if you look at the P-Cube1, which is the polygon cube that we've created, and go back and hover over your scene and click the F key, it will bring it right back in the center of your view. So this is the toolbox, and this is the viewport layout. The animation timeline and playback is going to be down here. So when you have animations, you'll be able to move along the time slider here. Below it is your Maya command line. So you're going to see things being written out here as you create things. So as you can see, result pcube1 polycube. So this is showing you the script behind Maya. And at the very bottom is the help line. So it displays short help tips for tools and selections, as you can see as you hover above different type of things. So on the right side, I currently have my channel box / layer editor. My channel box will be up here. So when you select create objects and select them, it will appear. All of the information will be here. So it is a polygon cube. We can see that it is at translate X0, translate Y0, and so forth. And at the bottom here are my layers. Very similar to Photoshop. So if you select an object and press this icon here, it'll create a new layer and assign the selected objects inside of it. And you can select if you want it to be visible or not. So when there's a V, it is visible, and there's no V's, it is not visible. If you wish to add an object to it, you can always select it and right-click the layer and click Add Selected Object. And this will add the object to your layer. And there we go. So this is Maya's interface overview. Next step, the basic primitives. So by default, this shelf is going to be open in Maya. If you do not see it, you can alternate by pressing the tabs here. So I'm going to go back to polygons, and we're going to begin at the beginning. So let's start by creating a sphere. So there you go, a sphere, a cube, a cylinder, a cone, a plane, the donut or torus, the pyramid, the pipe, and you're not going to have this one I added myself. This is the text one, which we're not going to touch. The SVG we're not going to touch as well. And these are going to be the tools that you use to work with your 3D shape. So I'm going to select everything here and press delete. So I'm going to start by creating a cube and scaling it up a bit. So let's see what these tools do. So I'm going to start by selecting a cylinder and move it to the side here. And I'm going to rotate it, and I'm going to rotate it to -90 degrees. So you can go in here and type it in. So I'm going to select it, again by pressing W, which is my shortcut for move. I'm going to move it inside the cube here. Now if I select both, I can always select just one at a time. But if I want this to become one object, I can highlight both, and click the combine option here. By clicking that, now it is one object. So when I rotate it, it's going to be one object. Before this, if I Control Z a couple of times and select both and try to rotate, it's going to rotate individually. So I'm going to select and combine both. The next icon is the separate icon. So it separates each one of them. This one is the mirror icon. So if I have this selected and click mirror, I'm going to have a bunch of options here, which is going to help me in creating a mirror of my shape. So currently it's asking me if I wish to cut the geometry on or off. So I do not wish to cut it. So I'm going to bring it to off. And as we can see, I'm on the world axis. So important to remember that the object have an axis and the world has an axis. So the current axis for the world is the center of the grid right here. So this object's center would be where it is at this point. So if I wish to duplicate or mirror from there to the world, let's try this. It's going to mirror it along this axis. But if it was on object, it will just mirror along its axis. You can also decide the offset, the axis direction. So currently we're working on the x-axis, and the rest is going to be fine for now. The next one we're not going to use very much of, so I'm going to scale it up, and by pressing this tool, this is the smooth tool. So this is going to smooth my object. So as you can see, it's not very nice this way. If I had a cylinder, for example, again, and smooth it up, you're going to see what this does. And this is not to be confused by pressing the 3 key on your keyboard, which is the smooth display. You can go back by pressing 1 on your keyboard. This one is to reduce the count. So if we smooth it and then we decide to reduce, we can do it this way. But as you can see, it's not exactly very nice. Next one, this is the one that we're going to use the most. This is the multi-cut tool. The multi-cut tool works in this way. If you press it, you can cut along any of the edges on your object. So I'm going to go around and create a cut that goes all the way around my cube. And see here, it shows me that it's closed if I go and press directly on this vertex. And press enter. And there we go. We have an edge. Now it isn't very straight, so I'm going to go to vertex mode by holding down right click, going to vertex, selecting all of them, and then scaling them down. By scaling it down, everything has come back to the center. Another way of doing this, I'm going to double click on the edge, so double click, press Control Delete, and the reason why you want to press Control Delete is if you do not, the vertices will stay behind. So I'm just going to press delete here, right click vertex, and as you can see, the vertices are here. But if I go to edge, double click, Control Delete, and go back to vertex mode, we can see the vertices are also gone. So back into object mode. Other tips for the multi-cut, if you hold down Control, it'll add the edge loop completely for you, so you can add more than one. And if you hold down Shift, it'll snap to the center of that edge. If I press once and then hold Shift, it will snap at 10% intervals. Another thing you can do, you can also visually cut like this. And as you can see, it'll cut as you've done. And I'm doing this by pressing once and dragging along the cube to create that cut. Next icon, so I'm going to go into face mode for this, is the extrude icon. So I'm going to select this face here and click extrude. Now I have a new manipulator. This manipulator allows me to move, scale, and rotate all at once. But in this case, I'm just going to use the move tool and bring it out. As you can see, I extruded my face. So I'm going to extrude again. And if by accident you clicked it, forgot about it, clicked again, and extrude again, you won't see it, but there is a second face inside of it. One way to find those hidden faces is to right-click on your object and go to Vertex Face. And as we can see here, this little line is a very, very small face. So I can go back to object mode. I'm going to go right click face. I'm going to select more than the faces that I need by marquee selection. And then I'm going to hold down Control and undo the selection of the top ones. And now press delete. Now if I go back to vertex face, I'm going to see that there are no more hidden faces in there. Last thing I'm going to check is I'm going to go to vertex and make sure the vertices are still attached. And as I can see, they are no longer attached. Which brings me to the next tool. So I'm going to select all of these vertices here, and since they are very close to one another, I can press this tool up here, which is the merge tool. So this is going to merge the vertices that are very close together. So when I click it, it's going to ask me the distance threshold. So if I bring it up, as you can see, it's going to grab all the vertices, but I don't want that, so I'm just going to leave it to, let's say, 0.2, but even at 0.1, it was close enough. Now if I click once and try to move it, I can see that all the vertices are back together. If you got rid of a face and you wish to fill it back up, you can go to edge mode. So right click, go to edge, select the top, select the bottom, and you can use this tool here, which is the bridge tool. The bridge tool will only work on four-sided faces. Again, it'll give you a bunch of options. The most important one would be the divisions. So how many divisions do you want in this face? We're going to leave it at 0 and keep it as is. Next one is the bevel mode. So if I go to edges and select all of these edges here, and I'm going to do this by double clicking the edge, or I can select the first one, hold shift and select the last one, and double click the last one, and it's going to select all the edges between. I'm going to press the bevel, and this is a very wide bevel, so I'm going to lower the fraction here. And if I want to, I can add segments to make it that much nicer and rounder. And there you go. So this is the merge vertex as I showed you earlier. If you wish to move some vertices, there are 3 tools for this. So I'm going to go to vertex mode, and if I want to bring this vertex on that one, I can weld them by using this icon here. So I'm going to click it, click and drag this icon to go to that one. And as you can see, I'm dragging all of these vertices. But if I wanted to, I can also move all of them over as close as possible, then select all of them, and then click this icon here for merge vertices. And I can also do it with this one, and since I only have 2, it doesn't matter how far apart they are, if I click it, it will merge them. And finally, if I want to have a straight line, I'm going to select everything, click the R key for the scale, and I'm going to scale it in. Right click, object mode. So I'm going to show you a couple of tricks for selection now. I'm going to delete what I currently have, and I'm going to create a cylinder. I'm going to left click on the poly cylinder here. If you do not see this, you can activate it by pressing this icon up here, or pressing Control A to alternate between this option box and this. So we're going to stay in the channel box, and down here there's poly cylinder 2. If I press it, I'm going to have a bunch of options for poly cylinder. So I'm going to add a bunch of height division by pressing once with my left mouse, and middle mouse click in the center of my scene just to drag and drop to decide how many faces I want to add. So selection tricks. I'm going to go to edge mode, right click, and I can click the first one, shift double click to the one I want, and it's going to select everything in between. If I double click this one, it's going to select the entire loop. If I double click this one, it's going to select this. As you can notice, it stops at the top and bottom. And the reason for this is it'll keep selecting until it hits a triangle. And as you can see, this face up here is a triangle. There are 3 sides, whereas all of the sides here have 4 sides. One of the good reasons why you wish to always be modeling with 4 sides, with faces that have 4 sides. Now, if you wish to delete an edge, you can double click and press Control Delete. Again, if you don't press Control, the vertices will stay behind. If you go to face mode, you can do the same type of selection. So left click and then shift click the one next to it to select the entire edge loop. Again, with edges, I can do the same thing. Select the edge, shift double click the next one, and it's going to select all of them around. In this case, the I'm just going to select my object and I'm going to bring it up since the grid is in my way. You can also hide your grid by pressing this icon up here. Okay, some other selection tricks. If I select this edge and wish to select the edges beside them, I can hold down Shift and the period button key on my keyboard. And this is going to add to my selection. I think this is going to be a little bit more clear if I go to vertex mode. So I'm going to select this vertex, Shift period, and as you can see, it's selecting the ones next to it a second time. And if I use the comma key, it's going to shorten my selection. This works with vertices, faces, and edges. Another very important thing in 3D is, as you can see, my object has a center pivot. So when I want to rotate it, it's pivoting around the center of the object. If I wish to move this pivot, I can hold down D and move it to wherever I want. If I press D again, then I'll be able to rotate it around this new pivot point. I'm going to undo. I'm going to press D again. And if you want to, you can hold down X, which will make it snap to the grid. So I'm going to hold down X, drag the middle icon here, and as I can see, I can drag it to the grid. So I'm going to center right to the center of the world, let go of the mouse, let go of the X, sorry, and I'm going to press D again. And through the rotation, as you can see, it's rotating along the center of the world. So X snaps to the grid, C snaps to the curves or the edges of an object, and V will snap to vertices. So, for example, if I had a giant sphere and I had my cube or my cylinder here, I'm going to hide my grid, and I want to snap it to the edge, as you can see, I can snap it by holding down C. If I hold down V, it'll snap to the vertices on the sphere. And if I bring back my grid, I can snap it to the grid by holding down X. You can also press spacebar to change the views and use it in the top view, front view, or side view. So I'm going to go in the side view here, and as you can see, by holding down X, I can snap it all the way along the grid that is in my side view. Now, final thing in this short tutorial is I'm going to go back into my main scene by pressing the spacebar above the window that I want to go in. And I'm going to create a simple object here by selecting the cube, scaling it up, adding a multi-cut to my object. If the edges don't appear, sometime it will happen. It is often related to Maya glitch. So the best way to fix it is just to restart Maya. But in this case, I'm just going to press delete on the cube. And as you can see, it's getting a little slow here. So anyways, I'm going to create the cube again. Right click face, select the face, extrude it. Oh, the edges just came in. Anyways, it doesn't really matter for now. I'm just going to scale it. Again, just move a couple of things. Right click object. And when you select your object and go back to your channel box, you're going to notice all of the tweaks that you've brought to your object are being recorded in its history here. This weighs down a lot on Maya. So one of the things I do regularly is to delete the history. So the way to do this is you're going to go to Edit, Delete All by Type, History. And this is going to delete the history. Next thing is, if you move your objects and decided that in your scene it should always be there at this angle, we can see all of the information for the translate, rotation, and scale here. So I'm just going to scale it up a bit too. So all of the information is up here. So the next thing to do in your cleanup scene is to freeze transformation. And the way you do this is going to modify, freeze transformation. Now it is 0, 0, 0, which means if by accident you move it, you can always select these input boxes here and press 0, 0, 0, and it's going to bring it back exactly to where it was before. So this is why freeze transformation really is important, unless you're using it on a rig, then never use it. Next point is to make sure the pivot is in its center. So if perchance you had moved it to the center of the world or somewhere else, then you're going to have to make sure that it is centered back into the object. And the way you do this is go to Modify, Center Pivot. Next point. As you go through your scene, make sure that you don't have any duplicate objects. So you can see this by moving them around. So I'm going to delete the ones that I do not need. Another thing to check and make sure is to make sure that your object has 4 sides. All of your faces have 4 sides. So let's start from the top. All of these faces here, so I'm going to right click, go to face. All of these faces here are fine. This one and this one are fine. This one, and this one. So the shelves are fine as well. All of these. Now this one here has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides. So I'm going to have to resolve this. The way to do this is I'm going to go back to object mode, select my multi-cut tool, and I'm going to add a cut from there to there. So this is going to create a 4-sided face here, a 3-sided face here, and a 3-sided face here. Ideally, you should never have 3-sided faces until we get to that point. So I'm going to go back, select the edge, press Ctrl Delete to delete the edge, press Ctrl Delete to delete this edge, and instead I'm going to add a line running across my entire object, and I'm doing this by holding down Shift, which is going to be centering my pivot, and finally not holding down Shift, I'm going to click it to select the final vertex. Going back to edge mode, I'm going to delete, Shift double click all of these edges since I do not need them anymore, and press Ctrl Delete. And now everything else should be 4-sided. Finally, we're going to check the outliner and make sure that everything is clean here. So if I right click, I can see there's a bunch of information related to my polygon cube, my cylinder, my cube again, and my last cube here, which is polygon cube 5. So this is going to be, let's see, asset Z. So I'm going to name it asset Z, right click, and now this is the name for this object. Important that you name it up here and not down there, since this is going to be the actual name and going to appear in your outliner. By selecting this object, I'm going to click my delete history shortcut, which I brought in here in my shelf. And you can do this by going to edit, delete all by type, history. And this is going to get rid of the information down here. But there's still some bunch of information up here. And if I click it and try to move it, I can see that there's nothing attached to it. So by clicking this, I can press delete. I'm going to select this one, press delete on the keyboard again, and select the last one, press delete. Now my outliner is perfectly clean. Another thing to make sure in your checklist is if you have objects that are part of your model, like this, for example, make sure that there's no gaps. So make sure that it's going in properly. So for example, let's say this is a button there on this object, my asset Z. Well, I'd want to make sure that it is going inside the object. I wouldn't want it to be just hovering above or just slightly in and out as like this. Right? I want it to be clean, so I'm going to move it this way and I'm going to bring it in a little bit. Actually, I can bring it in as much as you want. Another thing is to make sure that your faces are facing the right side. So in 3D, all of the faces are going to have a face normal. So this is the direction in which it's going to render once we create the renders for our scene. So I'm going to select the first face here, and I'm going to reverse it to show you what it's going to look like if it's not right. And this is what it's going to look like. To fix it, select the face, click Mesh Display, and go Reverse. And this is going to be the easy fix. So I showed you how to name your assets by clicking it and selecting it up here. And then finally, if this is the button, I'm going to freeze, transform, center pivot, delete history. I'm going to select both of them and I'm going to group it. And this would be my main underscore asset. And there you go. And this is going to be nice and clean. This way, if you have multiple assets in your scene, You can select the group by clicking it up here. And if you click once, as you can see, everything is still separated. So if you click once and press the arrow key up, it'll select the group for you. Or you can go into your outliner and select it here. And there you go. This is the cleanup scene checklist. This is the entirety of chapter 1. Make sure to ask questions, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you.